Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very welcome to the Austro-American Society here in Stallburggasse 2 in the first district of Vienna. My name is Philipp Ozenter and I'm the president since 2018. Tonight we have a very special evening and I would say it's full of energy. Rainer, can you tell us more?
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Austrian-American Society. We have a lot of different streams today, and I would like to welcome, beside all our members and friends on our Zoom stream, on our YouTube stream, especially the guests on heute.at, an Austrian-Viennese Austrian newspaper where we are streaming online. Welcome to the Austrian-American Society. Few technical inputs from my side, as it is an interactive process and we would like to have also your questions here with us. Please write your questions into the chat functions of the different streams and we'll try to answer everything what is possible in our hour here of discussion. Our moderator, our Vice President Monica Rosen, will afterwards introduce our guests. We are very happy to have all of you with us. If you are coming late or if you could not see all of that, you could have it on demand later on our different offers on the Austrian-American Society YouTube platforms. So have a nice evening. Stay with us. Come the next time again. We're happy to have you with us. And so, Monica,
enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this Super Tuesday here at the Austro-American Society. My name is Monica Rosen. As you've just heard, the topic tonight is energy. Now, if we look back 6 to perhaps 9 months, energy was probably top of mind for just about everybody. At least here in Europe, we were facing a dark and harsh winter. The lights were going to go out, and we were all going to be shivering in our insufficiently heated homes. Now, luckily, things did not quite turn out that way, but I think it is no exaggeration if I say that a serious post-mortem is in order. Was it due to luck? Or was it indeed a result of strategy? And indeed, if it was a result of strategy, how much of that was intentional? But I think at the end of the day, if you boil it down, 2 vital questions remain. Number 1, how did we get into this mess? And more importantly, number 2, how in the world are we going to get out of it? Well, here with me tonight is a panel uniquely qualified to answer those questions and indeed any other questions you might conceivably have on the topic of energy. So whether you're joining us online, as Rainer has pointed out, or whether you're here in the room with us, please join the discussion, make yourself heard, and ask your questions. We'd be happy to address them. I now want to introduce you to the 3 gentlemen who are kind enough and generous enough with their time to join us tonight to talk all things energy. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome, on my right, William Eco, the former US ambassador to Austria, today, among other things, CEO of the Partnership for Responsible Growth. Ambassador, it is a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
On my left, ladies and gentlemen, Bob McGuire. He is Managing Director of the private equity firm Carlyle, and he is co-head of Carlyle International Energy Partners. Bob, welcome. Thanks for being here. And last but certainly not least, bringing a uniquely Austrian perspective to the table, which is badly needed, of course, Gerhard Roiss. He is the former CEO of OMV. Mr. Roiss, welcome. All right then, sir. I will start with you, if I may. I understand that you have brought an introduction on the logistics of the Austrian gas supply. So please give us a brief overview of the subject to kind of get everybody in on the same page.
Thank you. To start to give an overview about European gas market, just allow me to start with the questions. How long do you think it takes a gas molecule to come from Russia into Vienna? To help, it's about 5,000 kilometers. How long will it take?
3 weeks.
Pardon? Speed is 30 kilometers per hour. It takes a week about that. So, to give you an overview about the gas market, European gas market is about 600 BCM, billion cubic meter. 300, half of it we have to import. Out of these imports, 45% was coming from Russia. 45% from Russia, and then you see some countries like Germany, it was 50%, Austria, it is 80%, Hungary, it's similar range. So 45% Europe was dependent on Russian gas. Nowadays it's 7%. There are just a few countries like Austria, Slovakia, and Hungary be more dependent on Russian gas. Austria is about, last figure March was 78%. Before it was 80% a year ago. This means Austria did not manage to get away from Russian gas. If you see the landscape, the logistics, you see it over there on the map. The main part is coming from Russia. On the one side, it is Nord Stream. You see on the left side, this green stream into Germany. You know, this was about 55 BCM out of 120, 130 coming into Europe. This is now offline. Then the second one on the right, you see the line coming from Russia via Belarus into Poland. Again, this is stopped by the Russians. And then you still have the pipeline via Ukraine coming via Slovakia into Austria, the Baumgarten. This is nowadays the only pipeline being on stream and has a capacity of about 55 to 70 BCM. It depends on. The issue just is here. There's a contract between Ukraine and Russia. This is lasting 24. This is about the landscape. We talk later on more about Nabucco. Bill will know more about it. And if you see the landscape here of Europe, you see 25% of imports are LNG. And you see the terminals more in the south. Germany had no terminal before the crisis. They managed to build a terminal in a couple of months, and they will come on stream with 3 more terminals, which is important to manage the security of supply. And in the south of Europe also gets gas via pipelines from Algeria and for Libya and so on. So this is the landscape in terms of import. You see how dependent we are, but you see on the other hand many sources of gas bringing to Europe. The only thing that is changed, historically the gas came from east to west, and now we have to go from the west to east because it's coming more from Norway, more from LNG from Germany, Netherlands. This is just, I could tell you more about it, but we can do it later. This is just the logistic. Logistic also remains on gas storage, we can discuss later, on terminals, which is important. And the price issue is another issue we can discuss later on. Just one last sentence. To see that we have a market failure, I'll give you one example. Austria bought a state reserve, 2 BCM. They paid 4 billion. If they would buy it now, it's less than 1 billion. This means no private or other company, stock-listed company will not go in this business. So it needs governmental support. That's for the big time beginning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so then perhaps we can start, Ambassador, with a simple question. Let's discuss which steps that we have taken have made sense and which ones have not, in your estimation.
Well, I think
there's no question, but that 10 years ago, when Gerhard and I were working on Nabucco, if we had pulled it off and Nabucco had brought non-Russian gas to Vienna, then not only would Austria be better off and have access to non-Russian gas, but a lot of this region of Europe would be better off, because there are pipelines from Baumgarten in Vienna that feed almost everybody in Europe. And so that was a lost opportunity. And we came that close, I would say.
Well, I understand that, Ambassador, but that is discussing spilled milk. Now,
it is.
Okay,
it's true.
So in terms of how would you evaluate the steps that were indeed taken, and
Well,
can you make suggestions, perhaps, what can be done going forward?
No question, but that in response to the crisis, in response to the lack of the flow of Russian gas, steps have been taken. Not maybe, I don't know how many in Austria, but in other places certainly.
In Europe, you mean?
In Europe. And so Europe has access now to other sources of gas.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing to me has been the exports that were going to Asia from the United States of LNG gas. 55% was going to Asia before the crisis, before the war. Now, last year, 70% shifted and went to Europe. And so where there was a loss of Russian gas of roughly 74 BCM to Europe last year, there was an increase in gas of 65 BCM from the US. So 88% of the loss from Russian gas, the drop from Russian gas, was replaced by an increase from the US. And so that begs the question, well, what are we doing now, right? Because US gas can go to anybody.
Isn't that the truth? And it'll probably go to the highest bidder. I would like to explore that a little further, but we do have questions indeed via Zoom from Ukraine. So, Rainer, would you like to go ahead here, please?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Do you have questions? I may start my short statement and introduction regarding the current situation and our vision regarding future of security, supply and energy security in the region and Ukraine. So may I start?
Yes, you may, sir, but perhaps you care to introduce yourself just briefly, who you are.
My name is Yaroslav Demchenkov. I am Deputy Minister of Energy of Ukraine. I'm responsible for market integration, green transition, sustainable recovery of Ukraine. Our current situation quite fragile, and we have one important task for the future. This is sustainable development of Ukraine and build back better and more sustainable energy sector, more integrated energy sector into European one. And this is the sphere of my responsibility here in the Ministry of Energy of Ukraine as a Deputy Minister. Over to you.
Okay. Does anybody have a question for the Minister here? A gentleman here at the front. Go ahead.
I'd just like to know why didn't Nabucco be finished? Why does it? Why didn't it work?
Later.
Let's come back to that.
Okay. Another gentleman here at the front.
Mr. Minister, why are you still importing gas from Russia?
Because it's coming to Austria.
Okay, I think that I will provide you information regarding current situation, and I will answer on all of your questions which was shared with me before. Thank you for this opportunity. You know that Ukraine is a country that likes to surprise. In February 2022, experts said that we would fall in 3 days. Today in May 2023, we are on a day 461 of our resistance. We even took back a lot of the territories that Russia occupied at the beginning of the invasion. This war, which shook the foundations of international law, started gradually. And here we were clear signals for what Putin was planning to do. For years, Russia increased its influence on the European energy market and weaponized energy sources, and this is clear. Together with other politicians from Central Eastern European countries, we had warning that Nord Stream 2 is not a pipeline, it's a gun that is pointed at European unity and independence. Still, this was a topic that was mostly ignored, but that became quite clear after February 24, 2022. We can go back in time to fix the past mistakes, but we can and we must prevent such strategic and tragic mistakes and miscalculation in the future. Lost lasting historical ties connect Austria and Ukraine. Thank you so much. I think that it's important for your contribution for the Energy Support Front and to the demining of Ukraine's territory. Great work, great job. That's crucial to save civilian lives, for farmers who work in their fields, for students who go to schools, for power line workers and engineers who repair energy sites damaged by Russian missiles. Even with the fighting still ongoing, we are thinking about what Ukraine can do for Europe after the war. Because now it's obvious that the fragility of one means the fragility for the whole continent. And common security architecture brings security for Europe, EU members. In terms of energy, there is only one way: to fully give up on Russian energy sources and exclude Russia from Europe's future energy system. Exclude weaponized Russian gas, oil, and weaponized Russian nuclear technologies. Like I said, Ukraine likes to surprise. We have a solution how to strengthen European energy security. Ukraine's significant energy potential that was in the showdowns is waiting to be discovered and explored. Ukraine can replace Russia as an energy supplier, even in gas, with one important difference. It will be clean energy that does not lead to wars or contribute to climate change. Today, colleagues, our efforts, including this meeting, are focused on turning Ukraine into a European energy hub.
Thank you very much, Minister. We certainly appreciate the very tough fight that you put on over there under very tough circumstances. And I do want to say that on a personal level that we are deeply sympathetic with everything that is going on. Now, Mr. Roiss, you will bravo.
Thank you. But colleagues...
Mr. Roiss, you care to reply?
Just one question. You know there's a contract bringing Russian gas via Ukraine into Europe. There's a contract lasting or ending 24. Can you give us an idea? Will this contract by Ukraine be renewed after 24?
No.
Or
No, we haven't discussed with this Kremlin regime which destroyed our infrastructure, regime which killed our people. Each night, each day, missile attacks, huge missile attacks, drone attacks, everywhere in each city, in the capital of Ukraine, a lot of people were killed. How it is possible to build usual business as usual with murder, with killers. Colleagues, I think this is really important message. We stop doing business with Russia as usual in each area, not just only in energy, in gas, nuclear, in renewables. We should find potential in our countries to replace Russia. For example, Ukraine. The World Bank estimated our just offshore wind generation at 250 gigawatts. We could provide sustainable electricity to Europe and replace Russia. We could do even more. We could replace Russia bloody fossil fuels everywhere. We don't need in sustainable and clean Europe these bloody fossil fuels.
All right.
And this is the
Thank you,
message.
Minister. Thank you very much for your input. We really appreciate you being with us tonight. And again, our best wishes go to Ukraine. And I think we can all say that we stand with your country in fighting for freedom and democracy. Now, all right. So
I think one other point, though,
yeah, okay.
that comes up from this, let's recognize the fact that Russia has and did weaponize its production of gas and its sale of gas. Russia started cutting back the flow of gas to Europe in 2021 in order to because they knew this war was coming, and they wanted to put Europe in a vice, and they wanted to put political and psychological pressure on Europe so that it would not join with Ukraine to help Ukraine fight back.
Well,
unfortunately, Europe has stood the test. Europe has stood up and said, okay, we'll find other sources of gas, and we will do without Russian gas. Austria, not so much.
Okay, so we'll get into that part in a minute, and we'll get to. I have a question from the audience. I'll get to that in a minute, but I would like to.
And I just want to say also
to
our Deputy Minister, thank you for joining us, and we are in solidarity with you. I even wore yellow and blue tonight to show my solidarity.
Okay, but what I wanted to say is, okay, so we're trying to replace Russian gas, and we've been in this stranglehold position, etc. But on the other hand, and I do want to hand the floor to Bob here for a second, the price of gas has declined substantially, and I read on Bloomberg today it is not out of the question that it'll go negative this summer in some parts of Europe, much like the oil price did in the spring of 2020 at the onset of the COVID pandemic. So do you have an expectation in terms of the gas price, and can you explain to me perhaps why this can be the case when at the same time we are still so dependent on Russian gas?
Well, you asked in the beginning what were the most significant, what were the steps that were done right? And I was thinking about that because that's important to understand how this has evolved. And I think what's interesting is there isn't one big step that was done right. We talk about the new LNG import terminals in Germany. Now, what that was a result of was a sort of acceleration of a planning process, which normally takes years to get done. It's a revelation when you suddenly need it. You can suddenly bring this thing on stream in 6 months. So it isn't amazing. It turns out that that's the reality of what it takes to get the steel on the ground and the compressors working and everything. That's all it took. But it was an acceleration of a process that normally is years. And you can play that throughout the system. You have similar kind of bottlenecks. That was just an example of where the bottleneck was broken. But I think, find that elsewhere in the system, and I think that'll explain a lot.
Okay, so we do have a question from the audience. Mr. Mandel, please.
Mr. Deputy Energy Minister, thank you very much for being on the program. Quick question, you said you see Ukraine as an energy hub for Europe. So my question to you is, what energy does Ukraine intend to export? Electricity, LNG or gas? So we're talking about LNG terminals. What do you see? Something just happened.
We've lost contact.
Sorry,
No,
back.
here.
What do you see Ukraine's role, and how will that energy be produced, and how will it make its way to Central Europe and to Austria?
Yeah, and thank you for this question. But colleagues, just come back to this gas issue. Russia gas can be replaced, for sure, as we saw last winter in Germany and other countries. And my frankly speaking suggestion, it can and should be replaced in Austria as well. And without harm to the economy, if we are use the existing infrastructure. Namely, the Germans can build LNG terminal in the Lubmin area and connect them to the OPAL and EU gas pipelines. And as I have mentioned, Ukraine, together with European partners, can provide storage facilities and should become an integral part of the EU gas supply security architecture, Ukraine. In this case, Baumgarten will continue to play a key role as a gas hub for the countries of the region, and Austria businesses will receive gas on attractive conditions, and consumers will be protected from supply disruptions without any extra cost. And frankly speaking, all of you know that you have signed a long-term contract with Gazprom, but the previous year provide that today's Russia has restricted from its strategy on strictly funding contracts, which even the USSR observed during the Cold War. It is now quite clear that Gazprom can't be considered as a reliable supplier anymore. Never supplier anymore. Gazprom has already stopped supplying gas to long-term counterparts in Germany, Denmark, the Baltic states, and Poland, disregarding the terms of their contracts. Think about this. And Gazprom's other counterparts have limited supply volumes. Hoping that Gazprom will continue to fulfill its obligation to OMV and Austria is a very risky strategy. And guys, colleagues, I think that you need to develop a solution to eliminate this dependence and implement it as soon as possible. And Ukraine has a huge potential in sustainable energy, in clean energy, in renewables. We will replace our thermal power plants, coal-fired generation with renewables, wind, solar, bioenergy, hydrogen, and we will deliver it to Europe. And we will have our green production, domestic green production of equipment, which will be including steel, green steel, and green equipment for green recovery, and we will provide this sustainable energy to Europe. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So we'll get to the subject of sustainable energy in just a second, but would you care to address the question of how Austria is going to make this transition away from Russian fossil fuels?
Just to ask if I have understood you right, you say you will stick to the existing contract and supply gas via Russia till end of 24, but you're not prepared to renew the contract. Is this right?
Yeah. We have existing contract, and we just provide our service, our pipeline, to deliver this gas, bloody gas, to Europe. This is decision of Europe should be stop using this pipeline and stop buy this gas. This is not our contract. We just provide services. We country where we have law. We have law. We are not a murderer. We are not. It's not a good business for us, for sure. But this is our country's obligation, not obligation within Russia, but with European Union, with our friends, with our partners. You temporarily need this gas. this amount of gas. But I believe we will not need any more Russian gas.
Yeah.
Sure, we will be able to replace this
Okay,
by Ukrainian
okay.
gas and by LNG from the US and other
We
countries.
understood that. Okay, so Bob, you care to reply, please?
Well, I'm just very interested in the Build Back Better. What's coming next? And what can Ukraine do that it hasn't up to now and that the world needs? One of the things that fascinates me is the possibility that Ukraine could supply 2G feedstock, that's second generation feedstock, to biofuels, which is a very important thing because we don't have enough 1G feedstock, which is edible foods, edible oils and food, and 2G feedstock, which is coming from Ukraine, straw and other sort of waste products, into the Black Sea. You can transform refineries in Romania, transform refineries in Bulgaria to produce biofuels. And I've heard it said that the Black Sea, for that reason, is the Saudi Arabia of 2G feedstock, potentially. So that's what I think is exciting to think about going forward after this horrible situation disappears and we started, how do we build back better? Well, that would be one way to do it.
I think we have a question from the audience. I'd like to hand it over to Rainer, please.
With a question from the audience to you, Mr. Maguire. What are the targets for foreign institutional investors in reacting to the actual political situation? Investments in alternative energy supplies, or are there other strategies?
There are other strategies, but and we do all of it. I mean, for instance, we brought on stream in the Romanian Black Sea last year, in the middle of June 2022, we brought on the first new gas in the Black Sea in 30 years. So that was a substantial amount of capital at substantial risk, which we nevertheless did, gas in Europe for European consumption. At the same time, we're investing in, I wouldn't say renewables particularly, but I would say energy transition. So in our business in Spain, we are now committing to 2 gigawatts of green hydrogen. We have sustainable aviation fuel. We have biofuels. We have EV charging throughout our network. And those are the kinds of things that you have to invest in going forward, including renewable energy. But the overall transition is important and it's exciting and it's happening.
Okay, and how would you summarize the situation for private equity in particular? Because the public markets perhaps might not always be so happy to supply the capital, or are there? Where do you see the particular role of private equity here?
There are many different ways in which private equity is uniquely suited to this particular environment. But I would say in general, if the question is, what is the cost of capital? The cost of capital is higher. The cost of capital is higher because of the risk. The cost of capital is higher because of the relatively limited number of suppliers of that capital. There's all kinds of reasons, but the net result is the price is going up, but there is a market clearing price.
Okay, all right. And you think that there will be sufficient interest in investing in this transition, or is this turning out to be a little more difficult right now than thought, with the rising interest rates, no less?
The interest in investing in the transition is enormous.
Yeah.
I mean, there's trillions of dollars being dedicated to the transition. The trick is finding investable opportunities within the transition. On the one hand, you have trillions of dollars looking for investment. On the other, you have relatively small scale investments being what are attracting the attention now.
Okay.
It's very rare where you find something that is scalable and big enough and material enough to attract a reasonable portion of these trillions of dollars.
All right then, okay. So that's always good to hear that the availability of capital seems not to be the problem. Do we have a question from the audience back there? Do I read that correctly? No, maybe. Yes, we do. We do. Go ahead. Rainer, behind you. There's a question from the audience.
Thank you very much indeed. I have a question maybe to Mr. Roiss, especially because of this project since years in the Black Sea, offshore Danube Delta area. And there was some unfortunate legislation then in Romania where it was delayed, but still it's said to be the largest, the biggest offshore project potentially. So what is going to happen? You are still a partly owner, if I understood correctly. I mean, OMV. Thank you.
I just can tell you what I learned out of the media. First of all, this is Neptune field called, and It was not developed as it was planned over the last 5 or 7 years, kind of sleeping project. Nowadays, as there's more need for gas also coming into Europe, and this is a potential gas also for Central Europe, as it's a huge field. Now I learned that mid of this year, June, July, there will be a positive decision to start now developing this field, which means it could be on stream 27. And if you see the landscape of today's pipelines, it's not like a Nabucco, but let's say 1 BCM could find its way into Austria as well. So it's positive. Negative is because when I was responsible, we had a plan to go on stream 2019, 2020. Now it's 27, but anyhow, it's good that we can get it.
Another question from the audience. Go ahead, sir.
Picking up on another project that is in the pipeline and that has hit the media only recently, do you see any potential for the gas fields close to Cyprus, Israel, Syria, Egypt? There is this new field, well, it's not new, but after all, there has been an agreement, as far as I know, an international agreement been struck among those countries about the joint exploitation of that field. Do you see any potential in that one? Probably to all of you.
Who would care to reply?
If you want me to give the answer, I think in the areas there's a lot of gas. It's Israel, it's Egypt, it's offshore, it's Cyprus, as you rightly said. But if you then go onshore and you see Iran, or if you see Azerbaijan, you see there's a lot of gas even on stream that you can bring into Europe. But the missing link is not to develop these fields. The missing link is what you have heard from Bill, is the Nabucco. You need a kind of highway to bring this gas into Europe. Yeah. Otherwise, you don't have the investment to explore it.
There's another question, but I think the gentleman would like to make an additional comment, just briefly. Just briefly. Okay.
Just a very quick one, because you were in charge back at the time. As I understand, the Azeri decision back at the time of the Shah Deniz oil field owners, basically, or those who had the rights, they decided deliberately to take the Trans-Adriatic pipeline. So what was actually the reason for them to choose not Nabucco, but TAP? Can you give any insight on that one? Because that was the crucial point back at the time, as far as I'm aware.
I give you some ideas, yeah. You know, there's Gazprom having a dominant position in the center of Europe, Baumgarten, Germany, Italy. So would you allow a former Russian state to go into the heart of the market, or would you think it's better to go in the southern part, via Greece into Sicilia, where TAP is going to? I think there's a lot of politics. Try to sell, because former they had to sell their gas via Gazprom into Europe. So now they're independent. Happily, they can bring the gas into Europe, but more in the southern part and not in the center of competition. That's a maybe.
May I make a comment about
Yes,
I can tell you this.
I just make it just while we're on the subject of.
Just a second, yeah.
While we're on the subject of the Neptune discovery and the development of Neptune, as another sort of voice for private equity, the project that we brought on stream in June of last year is immediately inboarded, joins the Neptune license. We decided to go forward with our project in 2018, whereas OMV Petrom decided not, for good reasons, but we took the risk at that time, and the result is we were able to develop and begin delivery last year. So that's a contrast between private equity and public markets.
It shows you can do it if you really want.
If you want to do it, yeah.
Okay, I think we can all get behind that one. Bill, you want to add something?
No, I just think that
you have to get in line, sir. Excuse me. Yes, go ahead.
this question did come up at the time that there was an alternative route, the TAP route, which was selected by Shah Deniz. And we were arguing, I was arguing very strongly for the Nabucco route. And ultimately, BP was the lead partner in Shah Deniz, calling the shots. And they gave us a target. They said, if you can get, I think it was 20 BCM of commitments, am I right? And we got to 18. Yes. And they said, if you can get to 20, we will come to Vienna. Because it was €1 billion more to come to Vienna rather than go to southern Italy. But our argument was, if you come to Vienna, you open yourself up to a bigger market, and you'll get a better price for your gas, right? Because there's going to be more demand if you access more countries. In southern Italy, you're just going to southern Italy, and they're already getting gas from, Libya. So they don't really even need your gas. They were willing to buy it. And so BP said, yes, but they're willing to commit to buy it. That's what we want. And can you get to 20 BCM? And we basically got to 18. One country that we expected to come in for 2 did not, which was Hungary. And unfortunately, I think, Mr. Putin has influence in certain countries, and he used his influence. That's my personal guess. So they decided not to come through. And, I would say at the same time, the fact that the US support, our State Department decided to go to neutrality between the 2 routes. I argued strongly for the Vienna route and was told that I could continue to push for Vienna, and we'd let the Italian ambassador push for the Italy route. And that way we'd be neutral. And I said, okay, fine. So I kept pushing for Vienna. But unfortunately, we just didn't pull it off. We came that close. When I said 18 out of 20, that's pretty close.
I understand that, Bill. Okay, the gentleman at the front the young gentleman has been very patient. Go ahead, your question, sir.
So it was mentioned a lot today that novel energy technologies like green hydrogen, biofuels will be required to facilitate this energy transition. To what extent do you think does Europe possess the know-how necessary to facilitate this transition? And to what extent will it rely on its American and perhaps also Asian partners?
Gentlemen, who wants to answer? Do we have what it takes to do the transition? Do we have the know-how required? And will we need and get help from our American friends? I hope the answer to the second part is yes.
I think Mr. Roiss said it right. If you want to get it done, you can get it done. I think the know-how is here. The resolve is here. I wonder whether the policy unity, the coherence of policy at the EU level is there to make it happen. But it could be done, yes.
All right. Okay. Sir, yes, please. You're next.
Also to Mr. Roiss, especially as Nabucco had been mentioned, and I was personally involved. Now we still have this TAP pipeline. How do you see the potential? It's going to southern Italy. It has connectors now, interconnected to Bulgaria. There could be an LNG terminal in Thessaloniki. That's an idea. And there is also the Krk LNG station. So how do you see supply from southeast towards Central Europe? Thank you.
I think it will not go along this way. I think it's important to have TAP for these markets, because if you now see these Turkish streams goes into Serbia and further to Hungary. So Hungary is independent already from the Ukraine. And they have a good contract with Russia. And it was quite a strategic position from Russia to build these Turkish streams into Bulgaria and into Serbia and Hungary. But this is for this house. I think if you see, being here in Central Europe, we have the pipelines, the highways to north, to east, to west, but we need a pipeline, a highway into this area where you have heard about Mediterranean, Cyprus, Armenia, and so on. So there's sufficient gas in the area, but there's still no highway. So you need a Nabucco 2 or 3 or whatever you call it. This is still not been done. The question is who is prepared to invest, takes a risk.
Okay, the gentleman in the back, please, go ahead.
My name is Mark Lager from DLA Piper. I have a question for Ambassador Eco. And so I was wondering, what measures is Russia taking to undermine efforts towards securing European energy supply and energy independence, if any? But
I think Russia is doing everything they can to undermine European alternative energy supplies. I often felt when we were pushing for Nabucco that I was playing chess with Putin, and he was always a step ahead. Because, for example, he went to Greece and tried to buy up the local Greek distribution system, and he looks at it as, okay, these are all levers he can pull. And so when you saw Russia reduce the supply of gas in 21 for no reason, other than the fact that they knew the war was coming, and they wanted to put pressure on Europe, so they did. But I think it's actually been great the way Europe has responded by shifting away from Russian gas, showing that they don't need it. What I would be doing today, I'd be building a pipeline, a bigger pipeline from the LNG facility in Kirk to Baumgarten, and from then you can flow more LNG because we've got 2 more LNG export terminals coming online in 23, 24. We'll be able to export more gas. And the US is already the largest now natural gas exporter after Russia, you know, and I think we're ahead of Qatar now. So it's amazing. And, you know, Europe has benefited. But what I worry about is the gas that was going to China, there was less demand from China because of the Chinese economy recovering from COVID. But now as it starts to recover, the Chinese are starting to book gas contracts again, and that gas could go back to Asia. So Europe needs to step up if it wants the gas and contract for it.
Can I just
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
kind of with the pivot to Asia, how is that related actually? Because of course, you know,
It's the market. You know, the U.S. ships the gas where the demand is because we don't have these, you know, contracts country to country. It's whoever picks up the gas can take it wherever they want. So, you know, that's the way we do business in the U.S., right? You back up your boat, we fill it with gas, you take it wherever you want, you're going to sell it to the highest bidder.
That's what I meant earlier on. Of course, just a second, there's a question from a lady. But that's what I meant earlier on, if I could just throw that in, that there will be competition in the market for the gas.
Yeah.
The reopening of China has perhaps not lived up to everybody's expectations so far. That's why
Which
demand...
is probably good for Europe.
I was
right
going to
now.
say, that's why demand has been tepid so far, but it will ramp up. That's the general expectation. And that might be one of the reasons why the gas price has fallen to the extent that it has. Now, whether that will remain the case is very much open to debate and highly questionable. There is a...
Just one statement.
Yeah,
you have to be aware that this is what I like to say is that LNG is a global market like oil. Pipeline gas is a local market. And that's an issue
Yeah.
we have
for
to be very
long-term
careful in
security, build a
Europe.
pipeline, right?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. So I want to hand the floor to the lady, please.
Yes, we keep repeating history, right? I mean, dependence on oil from the Middle East, dependence on gas from Russia. Here in this area, looking forward, we keep talking about gas here, but Europe is preparing also a massive transition to e-vehicles and moving away from gas. Meanwhile, China owns 71% of the battery-making capacity and most of the cobalt mines in the lands that are cobalt-rich, which are... So how do we prepare, how do we avoid putting ourselves in the same bind, you know, that we have the next supplier that can strangle us when they, for example, march into Taiwan? What are we going to do? What do you think we should do?
And I would say arguably that's an even more critical dependency because there it's not one of the numbers of suppliers, it's the only supplier. And so the strategic dependency you're creating there is even more risky than what we have so far seen.
And what about the strategic dependency the whole West, including the US, has on Asian technology, on the semiconductor production there? I mean, you're trying to bring that back home, but it's not just energy, if I might just touch on that subject for a second.
I think the difference between silicon manufacturing is that is inherently transportable. Someone else can do it, whereas we're talking about a finite resource. I mean,
that
cobalt,
is true, of course, yeah.
copper. I mean, this is going to be the age, if we're leaving the oil age, we're entering the mineral age. Minerals are even harder to get at than oil. I mean, creating a copper mine takes 15 years, 16 years. And there isn't enough copper in the world to provide all the batteries and all the sort of power we need, infrastructure we need to manufacture the EV targets that we have.
I would just say this. We may look at a supply line today and say, gee, our only source for cobalt is China. But there are other sources. When I was in Greenland last summer, there were people up there looking for cobalt and who believe it's there, and cobalt mining companies. So you can be surprised. Plus, there are new technologies coming in EVs that'll be less dependent on some of the metals that were used in the past, because they're figuring out new ways to power cars. So, you know, we may not need lithium anymore, for example. You know, right now, sure. But, you know, markets can change. And demand takes you in new directions. And people come up with new solutions. So I think that kind of thing will evolve.
Yeah, but do you feel that politically Europe is actually, you know, doing what it should be doing to not put itself in this position again? Because...
Look, I can disagree with a lot of decisions Europe has made. I mean, I think it was foolish personally for Germany to give up nukes. I mean, come on. Nuclear power is carbon-free. And you're trying to transition away from carbon molecules. Well, why give up nuclear just because of Fukushima? It made no sense to me. But you know, that's beyond my pay grade, you know.
Okay, we'll get into the of course, the topic of nuclear is a very broad one, and I think it deserves perhaps to do an evening proper on it.
One of the things we push for in the States is just put a price on carbon emissions and then let the market figure it out. And all these things, the marketplace will respond. It's dynamic. It'll figure things out.
May I just ask, where is the mic? Where is Rainer with the mic? There is a question from the audience on the left here.
Correspondent of Neue Zürcher Zeitung here in Vienna.
Welcome, thank you for joining us.
You said that if there's a demand for energy, then it's being bought. Yeah, right. And what I don't understand is we discuss about dependency and market. We say we are dependent on Russian gas, but if there's a market, the Russian gas is being bought. I mean, we say Austria is dependent 80%, 70%, but if Putin sends the gas, it's being bought. So I think we mix always two things. It's the dependency and it's the market. But we are not dependent. We are dependent on Putin's decision if he sends gas or he doesn't send.
Right.
But if he sends, we have to take it. We can't fire it up
well,
in Baumgart.
So what do you think about this? If you contract to buy it, you buy it, right? But the point is, if he cuts that gas off, then you could be at risk, right? So if he's not a reliable supplier, and if he makes decisions based on politics and geopolitics rather than economics, as a company would, right, then you're at risk. And so you have to develop alternatives.
Yeah.
He can't cut it off. Only he can cut it off.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Mr. Roiss.
Very clear. If you have no security of supply, that you know what Putin is delivering day by day. If you don't have this, so, and again, what we had before, doubling the prices, 10 times the price, and this is disturbing economy, and this will happen, can happen.
There is a question in the back.
The questions from journalists. I'm Martin Eder from Bloomberg. I would like to go back to one of the facts that you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation. Sorry. I'd like to go back to one of the facts that you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, that Austria is essentially back to where it was on Russian gas dependency, almost 80% again. My understanding is that part of this is related to the fact that there's a bit of indecision at the political level on how to diversify, and that it relates to sort of the institutional structure that we have in Austria regarding the long-term gas contract. And I understand there's been a debate which has been a bit on and off, and sometimes more recently it's again back on the agenda. But I just wanted to ask, how much is this an institutional question, and how much it is like essentially a political question of where you buy the gas from?
Mr. Roiss, please go ahead.
I think, first of all, we have to understand we have a market failure. And when you have a market failure, then you have to see how can government step in and manage it. Because you cannot invest today in a pipeline, the bottleneck, if you have no 10 years contract. And you will not get a 10 years contract because nobody knows if there will be a need in 10 years from now. And same is on price, same is on strategic storage. So the government has to step in, and German government did an extremely good job on this topic, and today they are not dependent on Russian gas. Austria did a very poor job. The only thing they did, they bought gas, strategic reserve of 2 BCM. Market consumption in Austria was 8, now maybe 7 BCM nowadays. So that's what's done by government. The rest, I don't see. This is just talking. There's no clear strategy. Mr. Bolz and myself made a proposal a few weeks ago. I sent a letter to the Minister of Finance. If you ask me, did you get an answer? No. We made very clear proposal. You can do A or B, it doesn't matter, but you have to do something, because you cannot say we anyhow get Russian gas, and you just heard here saying this contract 24 will not prolong. Italian government has, independent from this contract, stated there will no more Russian gas coming into Italy 24. Austrian government says we have the same in 27, but you know there's a contract, you cannot bring the gas anymore in 25. So this is how we manage in Austria. I wouldn't call it what manage this situation. We have more event marketing than we have crisis management.
Well, since the Germans have done such an excellent job, why don't we get it straight from the horse's mouth? Mr. Quauker, you are from Germany. The floor is yours.
Martin Quauker, Finanzjournalistenforum. You mentioned earlier the price might go negative, but what is your forecast for the supply and the price in the winter? We will have enough gas and the price will stay more or less this level, plus minus, or we will see very high prices again.
Bob Maguire, do you care to answer? What's Carlyle's projection there?
I would say that the risks have been described pretty well. The risk of increased demand from China, the risk of, I think one of the sort of underrated actions that Europe took was conservation. And I'm not sure we've seen the limit of conservation, but that is an extremely important demand function. So there's so many of these things that can go either way. I'd say this year, more so than other years. From the beginning of 2023, there has been an unusual lack of consensus about where any of this is going, both on the demand and the supply side. There's a general view that supply is underfunded. So people, probably more because of ESG than the crisis now, but people have not been funding the development of new supply. So there's an inherent sort of limit.
That is also true for oil. That's
true for all energy sources. Fossil fuels, because people are not investing in fossil fuels now. That's a policy objective, but that limits supply, which is going to have a kind of upward pressure on price, depending on where demand goes. But so there's a lot of complex sort of pressures in both directions.
Well, I can appreciate that this is hard to pin down, but it was a classic example from an answer from an investment banker. You didn't really give us a direction. So I'm going to try one more time. And I used to be head of research. Can you give us a rough estimate where you think prices are going?
Well, we are investing. Right? We're investing now. So we have a view on where prices are going. But
one that you can share?
Well, not particularly.
Okay, all right. Well, that's an answer. That's an answer, certainly.
Yeah, because for us, it's not about really oil or gas price. It's about when you have the asset, what do you do with it? Can you take costs out? As long as you're producing intramarginally, that is below the highest cost of the next producer, it doesn't matter where the price is in a way.
Okay, all right. Well, I understand that, and I'm going to let it rest. But the only thing I'm not going to let stand is that the prices won't matter. I think for everybody in this room and everybody online, they do matter. Okay, so I do understand, Rainer, there at the back, that we have another question from the online audience.
Yes, I have two questions from the online audience.
There you
go. Very short questions, but short and clear. Will Nord Stream ever be functional again? First question. Second question, will the merit order system have a future?
There you go. Bill, you want to answer the first one on Nord Stream?
I do not know. I will say that, I mean, look, Nord Stream 1 was built and then all of a sudden had mechanical problems because they wanted to put pressure on Europe, right? They wanted to restrict the flow of gas. And then there was an explosion in Nord Stream 2. And nobody knows who was behind that
That
explosion.
is a very opaque situation there,
So,
yeah, right?
Again, it puts pressure on Europe, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And maybe this is an opportunity for Europe to say, you know what, we'll do without. And, you know, it's not succumb to the pressure, but develop its own sources.
That might be easier said than done. Mr. Roiss, please.
One issue on this topic of Nord Stream 1 or 2 is that there are many European companies having long-term contracts with Gazprom, 2030, 2032. Austria has 2040. So the question is, how can I get rid of this contract? And as long as you have no pipeline, it might be easier to get out. And I don't think anyone would invest in this pipeline. This might be a reason that...
Well, I don't want to over-exercise the pun here, but we do seem to be running out of energy, perhaps not, but certainly out of time a little bit. So I would like to go for a final round here. So if we look out, let's say 12 to 24 months, where do you personally see the major challenges, and how do you think the problem will be solved in the medium term, that is energy supply in Europe? Can you go first, Bill?
I think that Austria should be looking for opportunities to look elsewhere and find other sources, be it pipelines to Kirk or pipeline to somewhere else, some other connection. I think that Austria needs to think about refilling tapping off its capacities to go in so that make sure that next fall every molecule that can be stored is stored, so that there is gas.
You have a feeling we're not doing that?
Well, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just saying it'd be a good thing to do. And as to the timing of buying the gas and the price, et cetera, I can't predict, but I think keep an eye on the Chinese recovery, because the demand there could make it very difficult to buy gas at a good price.
Mr. Roiss.
Well, I see it more from the European perspective, and I think Europe has to address a more strategic approach into gas. They started already buying gas as European Union, starting buying gas like the Chinese are doing it in 20 years. Yeah, just one single buyer, much better price. So Europe is going that way. Europe has to think about infrastructure that they need to bring gas at competitive cost into the markets. And I think Europe is aware of it. It's a question how long it will take us to get on stream with this idea.
I have a question, though, Gerhard. All this investment in gas pipelines, when we eventually move off of fossil fuels, can't that be converted to move hydrogen?
The positive issue is that nowadays you can transport about 40% of hydrogen into the existing gas pipelines. Long term, when you build new one, you have different technology. But if you think about bringing now hydrogen from north of Africa and so on into Europe, you have existing pipelines and you can start already now doing it. And that's a chance now to transfer this gas infrastructure long term into hydrogen infrastructure. Again, this needs European support.
This sounds very promising, and I take that as a very encouraging sign. Bob, I want you to appreciate that I'm giving you, as the investment banker, the final word. Please go ahead.
Well, I'm not an investment banker, but that's okay. I was an investment banker.
You used to be one. Come on, yeah, okay.
Your question was, where are we going to be in
and where do you see investment opportunities, briefly, perhaps?
What is the biggest challenge? I'd say the biggest challenge remains reconciling this focus that we've had on strategic dependency on what happens to be fossil fuels, because that's where we've come from, with the need to embrace the energy transition. And which way does Europe go? Are we going to rush to resolving our short-term problem, which is energy supply today, versus what energy we're going to get in the future? And that's an unresolved issue right now. And I think that's where the biggest tension is going to come over the next 24 months.
All right, then thank you very much, gentlemen, for giving us all your insights and your precious time tonight. I think we've all learned a lot. I think it is now time a little bit to recharge our batteries, but I have certainly enjoyed being with all of you tonight. Thank you for watching, and I will now hand you back to Rainer, who will see you out. Everybody have a nice night.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us tonight, and for the nice questions and very structured discussion, Monica. What you did. There were a lot of questions now coming in on the chat lines. We didn't have the possibility to answer all of them. We try to hand them over to our experts and then coming back to you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being with us, and hope to see you back soon in the Austrian American Society. Have a good evening, and thank you very much to the panel. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.